Happening tomorrow, the long-awaited trial over the 1996 killing of rap icon Tupac Shakur starts in Las Vegas. Attorneys are fighting over whether the jury will hear confessions from the accused mastermind, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. Death Row Records founder Suge Knight is on the witness list.
Nearly 30 years after Tupac was shot in Las Vegas, Keefe D was finally arrested and scheduled to face trial. But then something unexpected happened, and it raised a serious question about whether Shakur and the rest of the Shakur family would finally get the justice they had waited so long for. I'll reserve judgment. On September 29, 2023, a Clark County grand jury indicted Dwayne Keefe D. Davis on a murder charge in connection with Tupac Shakur's death.
Davis claims he was tricked into talking, but prosecutors argue he proudly repeated his story for profit.
Davis was arrested that morning outside a Las Vegas area home. He was 60 years old. The killing had remained unsolved for 27 years, making the arrest a major moment in a case that had haunted fans and the Shakur family for decades. Within hours, Keefe Shakur posted a statement on Instagram. She is Tupac's younger sister and president of the Tupac Amaru Shakur Foundation. Her message stretched across several paragraphs. She called the arrest a pivotal moment and said the silence of the previous 27 years had spoken loudly in her community. She also explained why the moment mattered so much to her. She said it mattered that the world, the country, the justice system, and her people acknowledged the gravity of losing this man, her brother, her mother's son, and her father's son.
You know, over the years we have found ways to cope with the trauma, with the drama.
Then came the line that would shape everything that followed. She said his life and death mattered, and that what happened should not remain unsolved or unrecognized. She called the arrest a victory, but added that she would reserve judgment until all the facts and legal proceedings were complete. Reserve judgment until the facts and legal proceedings were complete.
It has been rough, as it would be for anyone revisiting a situation like this.
Read that again, because it became the key to what followed. Keefe was not declaring victory just because an arrest had been made. She was waiting to see what happened inside the courtroom. Her brother, Mopreme Shakur, took a similar position that same weekend. He told TMZ to keep the popcorn, because they were still waiting to see how everything would unfold. Two siblings, two statements, and the same cautious posture.
And try to still continue on and have a full life, you dig?
What followed was a long stretch of delays. Davis pleaded not guilty in November 2023. A judge set a June 2024 trial date, but that date was later pushed back. Then, in January 2025, Davis asked the court to dismiss the case, arguing that earlier agreements with law enforcement gave him immunity and that the 27-year delay in charging him was unfair. Clark County District Court Judge Carly Kearney rejected the request to dismiss the case. The prosecution could continue, but the legal fight was clearly far from over. She noted that the district attorney's office had no obvious advantage from waiting 27 years, and that Davis's own book had helped push prosecutors toward taking the case before a grand jury. Then, in February 2025, the defense asked for more time. Davis's lawyer said a private investigator had located witnesses who could place Davis outside Las Vegas on the night Tupac was shot. Judge Kearney moved the trial from March 2025 to February 9th, 2026. Then another legal problem entered the picture.
Basically, he kept saying that he is innocent. I brought up this book that clearly has his name in it.
In April 2025, Davis was convicted in a separate, unrelated case involving a fight with another inmate inside the Clark County Detention Center.
We just wrapped up an interview with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis just a couple of days ahead of his murder trial for Tupac Shakur.
The jury reached its verdict in about 90 minutes. He was later sentenced in September 2025 to 16 to 40 months. Then came another delay. In November 2025, the Tupac trial was pushed back again after Davis changed legal teams. His new attorney argued that the discovery in the case was too extensive to review properly in the available time. Judge Kearney reset the trial for August 10, 2026, adding another 6 months to the wait. Through all of this, Keefe Shakur made no further public statement about the murder case. that did not mean she had disappeared from public view. She and Mopreme had both criticized authorities over the amount of time it took to charge anyone in connection with Tupac's death. Shakur was also involved in a separate legal battle concerning the administration of her mother, Afeni Shakur's estate, a case she and the Tupac Shakur Foundation filed in January 2022. She appeared publicly when Tupac received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in June 2023, but when it came to the murder case itself, there was silence after that first Instagram statement.
You see, he clearly says that me and my sister at the fight, I showed this to him.
Then, during the first week of August 2026, the witness list was released. 8 News Now obtained the document showing the people prosecutors intended to call, and the names on it immediately raised eyebrows. The list included Marion Suge Knight, who was driving the car when Tupac was shot. It also included former Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman and Nevada Governor Joe Lombardo. Then came names much closer to the Shakur family: Sakiwa Shakur, Tupac's sister, Maurice Mopreme Shakur, his stepbrother, and Katari Cox, his cousin. Sakiwa's name was not there as a commentator or family spokesperson. It was on the state's witness list. She was being identified as someone prosecutors could potentially call to testify. That distinction could become one of the most important details in this entire story. And then there was the issue surrounding the book Davis says he never wrote. Just 4 days before jury selection, a camera crew caught a member of the Shakur family for a short segment about the trial. The clip spread fast. It was shared, reposted, clipped, and turned into captions across platforms that follow hip-hop news.
But he kept saying that he's innocent and he will testify if he feels like he has to.
But while people rushed to react, one detail was easy to miss. So let's go back to the very beginning of that segment and look at how it opened. That framing tells you everything about how the media was treating this week. This was not just another hearing or another routine motion. This was the trial that had been promised, postponed, and promised again since 2023. The report then moves straight into the fight happening behind the scenes, the battle the jury would never see. Confessions, plural. That single word carries a lot of weight, and we'll break down exactly what it means in a moment because it sits near the heart of the prosecution's case. But the report had one more major name to reveal, and that name turned the story from a courtroom case into something much bigger for hip-hop culture. It was the man who had been behind the wheel of the BMW, the only other known living person who was inside one of the 2 cars that night. He was grazed by a bullet, survived the shooting, and is now serving a 28-year sentence in a California prison for an unrelated killing. Then, the report summed up the central dispute in the entire case with one sharp question. Was he tricked or paid? Was he pressured into talking, or was he trying to profit from the story? That is the fork in the road, and a Clark County jury will ultimately have to decide what evidence they believe.
There was detailed sentences about the night that Tupac Shakur was murdered.
Then the segment turned toward the Shakur family, and suddenly the tone changed. What followed was the part of the footage that spread the fastest. A Shakur family voice speaking plainly about what nearly 3 decades of waiting has actually felt like from the inside. There was no shouting and no dramatic performance, just a tired matter-of-fact delivery from a family that has faced the same questions at anniversaries, in documentaries, and across podcasts for decades. And then came the part that hit the hardest: trauma and drama. 2 words that sound alike but carry completely different meanings. The Shakur family has lived with both on a massive scale: the private pain of losing a 25-year-old family member and the public spectacle that grew around his death. Every new headline brought the case back into the spotlight, while the family was left carrying a loss that never really left. And the sentence ended with a phrase that will sound familiar to anyone who has followed the Shakur family's words over the years. You dig? Hold on to that phrase. It is a verbal fingerprint, and it points to a very specific person in the Shakur family, a person whose identity will become important before this story is over. The segment ended by turning toward what was about to happen inside the courthouse: jury selection and the evidence questions still hanging over the case.
If I asked one more question about it, kept saying that he was not in Vegas that night.
That same family member gave a longer interview around the same time, and the full version filled in some important gaps. They said the last 30 years had been exhausting and stressful for the family, and that they had waited a very long time for this moment. Sitting through testimony, they explained, could be re-traumatizing. Still, they described themselves as cautiously optimistic that justice could finally arrive. They hoped the trial would be fair and that the truth would come out. That was the family reaction the internet consumed during the week the trial began. Now, let's look at the man at the center of the case. case, Duane Davis has spent much of the past decade publicly saying he was there that night, not hinting, not vaguely suggesting it, saying he was there. In 2018, he appeared on BET's Death Row Chronicles and discussed the shooting, saying the fatal shots came from the backseat of the Cadillac. Then, in February 2019, Davis published a memoir titled Compton Street Legend, co-written with Yusuf Jah. The book opens in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. Davis describes getting a handgun, entering a Cadillac with 3 other people, searching for Tupac and Suge Knight after a fight earlier that evening, and throwing the gun into the back seat, where another person allegedly used it.
Davis was kind of upset that I kept bringing it up. He threatened to walk away from the interview.
That memoir became a major part of why Davis is facing trial. Prosecutors have made that clear. Judge Kearney made the significance of the book clear when she rejected the request to dismiss the case. The memoir helped push the investigation toward a grand jury, creating a brutal problem for the defense. To challenge the prosecution's version, they have to persuade jurors that Davis's own published and promoted account of one of hip-hop's most notorious killings should not be treated as an admission of what happened. And that is exactly the argument the defense began building. Defense attorney Michael Sumpf argued that statements in the book could not simply be attributed to Davis because a ghostwriter was involved. In Sumpf's words, the ghostwriter had sort of made it up. The prosecution fired back with a blunt argument. In a court filing, prosecutors wrote that a defendant cannot market his own alleged confession and then expect the courthouse to treat that material as confidential. On June 30th, 2026, Judge Kearney ruled that the memoir could be admitted as evidence. She also ruled that prosecutors could present gang-related evidence to establish motive. But that was not the only piece of evidence creating pressure for the defense. Then came a second front, a recorded interview Davis gave to police in 2008.
It was brought up in court and could be used as evidence in the trial.
The interview was conducted by former Los Angeles Police Department Detective Greg Kading, who was investigating the deaths of both Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. Davis placed himself inside the Cadillac during the events described in the recording. The interview later appeared in Greg Kading's book Murder Rap and in several documentaries. But the defense challenged the recording, arguing that Davis's statements in 2008 were involuntary. Davis was facing drug charges at the time. His attorney, Michael Sumpf, argued that Davis was under serious pressure. He was not free to walk out, Sumpf said, because of the threat that he and his family could be prosecuted. Sumpf also pointed to what an LAPD detective told Davis during the interview, that statements made during the session could not be used against him. But on July 28, 2026, Judge Kearney ruled that the 2008 recording could be admitted into evidence. 2 rulings. 2 major doors closed. Both of Davis's previous accounts were now headed toward the jury. Then, just days before jury selection, a Las Vegas reporter got Davis on camera, and this was the strange part. Only days before the biggest trial of his life, with both of his earlier accounts already cleared for use in court, Davis agreed to give another interview. The reporter brought a physical copy of Compton Street Legend into the room. Davis's name is on the cover, making that a pretty significant move against someone who had spent years arguing that the book should not be treated as his account, not could be, not might be.
Those close to the case say reliving the tragedy hasn't been easy.
The ruling had already been made 5 weeks earlier. The memoir was admissible, and that is where the details became a serious problem. A vague story can be brushed off as exaggeration, but a detailed play-by-play is much harder to explain away. When the reporter kept coming back to the book, the mood in the room appeared to shift. Davis had agreed to the interview. He had chosen to speak, yet the one topic he clearly did not want to accept was the same material he had been publicly connected to through the memoir. His response was simple. He was not in Vegas. That became a central part of his defense. Davis has told reporters that he was about 300 miles away in Los Angeles and told this crew directly that prosecutors could not prove otherwise. Then, the reporter brought out a photograph. September 7th, 1996. Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand. Tupac attended the fight. Hours later, Tupac was shot at a red light near East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, just off the Las Vegas Strip. And there was the problem. A photograph printed in Davis's own book, with a caption attributed to his account, appeared to place him at the Tyson fight on the same night he says he was in another state. Davis pushed back hard. He told the crew the photograph was actually taken on January 1st, 1998 at the Sheraton. He questioned why he would be wearing a suit, overcoat, and hat in Las Vegas during September. He also repeated his position about the memoir. He said he never wrote the book, a ghostwriter did, he never read it, and he was only promoting it because he wanted to make money for his family, if he has to. And that brings us to the room where all of this will finally be decided, with the two sides just 30 feet apart. The Regional Justice Center at 200 Lewis Davis Avenue in downtown Las Vegas was never designed to handle the kind of attention this trial has attracted. By Monday morning, August 10, 2026, the 8th Judicial District Court had already acknowledged that demand for courtroom seats would far exceed the available space. The court announced a daily seating lottery, turning even getting inside the courtroom into its own event. Members of the public hoping for a seat in the main courtroom have to report to the room 2421 overflow area at least an hour before proceedings begin, and winning a seat on Monday does not guarantee one on Tuesday. Everyone else has to follow the proceedings through a live video feed on the second floor. Judge Carly Kearney is presiding. Dwayne Davis, now 63, faces one charge: murder with a deadly weapon, with the allegation that the crime was committed with the intent to promote, further, or assist a criminal gang. If convicted, he faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. Davis has rejected a plea deal. Jury selection is expected to take up to a week, while the trial itself is scheduled to last about 4 weeks, with the possibility of stretching to 6. But here is where the prosecution's case is narrower than many people might assume. Prosecutors are not claiming that Davis pulled the trigger. They have never made that their central argument. The trial may never establish who actually fired the shots that killed Tupac Shakur. Instead, prosecutors are expected to argue that Davis helped set the killing in motion and provided the weapon. That distinction is huge. The 3 other men in that Cadillac are all dead. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, Davis's nephew, and the man long viewed as the most likely shooter, was killed in an unrelated Compton shootout in 1998. He was never charged in Tupac's killing. DeAndre Freaky Smith and Terry Bubble Up Brown have also died. That leaves Davis as the last surviving member of that car, and in a strange twist, potentially the prosecution's most important source of evidence against himself. The state expects to call between 35 and 45 witnesses. Leonard Jefferson, a California man who pulled alongside the BMW and took what became the last known photograph of Tupac alive, is expected to testify. Danvontai Lee, who is affiliated with the Southside Compton Crips, also testified before the grand jury. He described connections between rival Crips and Mob Peru sets and the Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records camps, respectively. Lee testified that Davis was in charge, that Davis handed the gun to Anderson, and that Anderson passed it to Smith because Anderson did not have a clear shot. But there is a major limitation. Lee was not there that night. Other expected witnesses include Malcolm Greenidge, a friend traveling with Tupac's entourage, Reggie Wright Jr., former Death Row head of security, whom Davis has publicly accused of organizing the killing, Yusuf Jah, co-author of the memoir, Kirk Burroughs, an early Bad Boy Records executive, Rashina Smith, who was Anderson's girlfriend at the time, and Suge Knight, whose address is listed as the California Department of Corrections. As the only other surviving eyewitness from either vehicle, Knight's testimony could become a major factor in the case. But there is a catch. He has previously said he will not testify. Davis's own attorney has even suggested that Knight could be a strong witness for the defense. The defense, meanwhile, expects to call fewer than a handful of witnesses. One of those witnesses is an expert who specializes in false confessions and coercive interrogation techniques. That is the defense strategy in one sentence. Davis told this story repeatedly, and the defense wants jurors to believe that every version was either driven by money, influenced by police, or both. Sanf took the case pro bono and has publicly said he believes his client is innocent. Now look again at the witness list. Sakiwa Shakur, Maurice Moprim Shakur, and Katari Cox, 3 members of Tupac's family, appear on a document filed by the state of Nevada. That does not automatically mean all 3 will testify. Attorneys sometimes list people so they can ask prospective jurors whether they recognize them or have connections to them, but their names are there, and that matters. There was also another detail from the jailhouse interview that received surprisingly little attention. When Davis was pressed about the book, he became defensive. He said he was not there to discuss it, claimed his family's life was in danger, said lies were circulating, and referred to a gag order covering that type of discussion. A gag order. Think about what that could mean for anyone whose name appears on a witness list in a murder trial that has been building for 3 years. Then think about who else appears on that same list. So let's answer the question directly. Has Tupac's sister reacted publicly to Keefe D's trial? The honest answer is no. Sakiwa Shakur has not issued a public statement about the trial, not when the witness list was released, not when the judge ruled that Davis's memoir could be admitted, and not when jury selection began. The footage that spread during the week the trial started, the voice describing the trauma and the drama, the voice saying, "You dig," was Maurice Moprim Shakur, Tupac's stepbrother. He gave interviews during the pretrial period, explaining that the past 30 years years had been exhausting and stressful for the family. He said sitting through the trial could be re-traumatizing, while also saying he remained cautiously optimistic. He hoped the trial would be fair and that the truth would come out. The clip is real. The grief is real. The family connection is real. But the person speaking is not Tupac's sister, and that distinction is important. This is not a gotcha, and Sakiwa's silence should not automatically be treated as a sign that she does not care or has nothing to say. There is a very practical reason why someone who runs her brother's foundation has been one of the family's most visible advocates and spoke publicly after Davis's arrest might suddenly become quiet when the trial finally begins. She is listed as a prosecution witness. Witnesses generally should not be giving media interviews about evidence in an active murder trial. Doing so could give the defense ammunition, create questions about testimony, or potentially cause serious problems for the prosecution later. Davis himself referred to a gag order involving the case, and in a trial built heavily around the credibility of statements and the reliability of memories from decades ago, a potential family witness speaking publicly about the case could create more problems than it solves. That is not silence without a reason. It may be silence because the courtroom now matters more than the cameras, and here's the part that ties everything together. Sakiwa already told the public she would approach this moment carefully. Go back to September 29, 2023. Go back to the sentence Tupac Shakur wrote just hours after Keefe D Davis was arrested. She called the arrest a victory, but then made something very clear. She would reserve judgment until all the facts and legal proceedings were complete. That was not a throwaway line, it was a commitment. And now, in August 2026, with cameras outside the Regional Justice Center and hip-hop media waiting for the Shakur family to speak, she has stuck to it. So if you clicked expecting a fiery statement from Tupac Shakur about Keefe D's trial, you are not going to find one. The statement she made 3 years ago is still her position, and her silence during the opening of this trial may be the most consistent thing she could have done. But there is one more detail worth sitting with. If Tupac Shakur is eventually called to testify, she will not be reacting to this trial from behind a phone screen. She will be reacting from a witness box, under oath, potentially just 30 feet from the only man ever charged in. Connection with her brother's killing. That is a completely different kind of moment, one that no Instagram post can capture, and no reporter can force out of her in a hallway. The proceedings are scheduled to last roughly 4 to 6 weeks. Prosecutors have a memoir, a 2008 recording, and potentially up to 45 witnesses. The defense has an expert focused on false confessions and coercive interrogation, along with the defendant who says a ghostwriter created the account prosecutors are putting before the jury. Suge Knight is on the witness list, even though he has previously said he does not intend to testify, and somewhere on that same list, among former officials, investigators, alleged witnesses, and members of Tupac's own family, is the name of a woman who has spent 3 years saying she would wait for the facts before passing judgment. 30 years of silence around this case, Sakiwa wrote, had spoken loudly. Now her own silence is speaking too. But what happens next will not be decided by Instagram, headlines, or internet theories. It will come down to evidence, testimony, and what a jury believes happened nearly 30 years ago. So what do you think? Does Sakiwa's silence show respect for the legal process, or do you think she should speak publicly about her brother's case? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who has been following the Tupac case for years. Your support helps the channel keep digging into the facts behind the biggest stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.